Alright, first video, actual video of trimming. We're going to start with the chest armor. And the plan is going to go flush along this line here, so there's probably maybe a 1 to 2 millimeter return edge. And I'm going to keep most of this return edge here along the edge. And then probably go with maybe like a 5 millimeter return here. Not as concerned about this because these will be mounted here. If you can see that. That's my guess anyway. I'm going to keep probably a 3 millimeter return edge around here. And same here, and then repeat where most of the return edge is going to be this portion here, minimal here. And then I'm going to probably keep maybe a centimeter all the way around on the bottom here. And then sand this portion down well because that's going to dig into my chest. So this is where we're going to start. This part is always the most nerve-wracking because it's the idea of cutting into the ABS, and you can't go back. So I'm using a curved lexan. I do have a straight, but I like the curved because it allows me a little bit more flexibility, and I'm able to sustain longer straight cuts with it. So we're going to go right up here along this edge, and just when you're cutting with lexans, just take your time, just go slow and steady. You're not in a rush. Other people swear by the score and snap method. I hate the score and snap method. I feel so out of control. And every now and then you just go back in, snip off a little bit so that you can go back in and resume with less tension. Because the further in you go, the more tension there is. So, if I go back in and look at this in a little bit more detail, that edge is okay. We're going to go back over that with sandpaper. Alright, so now I'm going to work around this edge here. Notice how I've got the scissors away from the cut. This makes these round cuts so much easier and more fluid. And look at how clean that is. And if you can see this, really nice and clean. Then I can go back in and I can move that excess, reduce the tension. Every time you remove some of the excess trim, it reduces the tension off the cut. And just go in and just try and be methodical about it. You don't rush it. Make every millimeter of your cut intentional. So know where you're going. Don't be in a rush. The thing about return edges is that it's a double-edged sword, I think. It's great for adding the illusion of depth to your armor, but in the same breath, you risk, you lean towards making the armor a little bit more uncomfortable to wear. because all of this starts digging into your chest or your side or whatever. Now, once you may reach a point where it's a little bit more difficult to cut. If so, just come back at it the other way. I'm just going to flip the lexans around and dig in. Come at it from the other way. Walt's armor is a little bit thicker than I'm used to. I had a kit from RWA Creations in the UK, and the kit that I ordered, the Stormtrooper kit that you see over there, that was 1.5 millimeters. And that was a hell of a lot easier to cut and work with. This is a little bit thicker. I'd say this is probably 2 to 2.5 millimeter ABS plastic. I suppose I could actually go back and go in and measure this. Right here, I'm reaching a point where it's difficult, and you have to be very careful not to cut straight 90-degree cuts or have little cuts going into. You want to keep your cut fluid. Keeping your cut fluid will help reduce fractures in your armor, and you will get them from time to time. Right there, that looks pretty good. We'll go back over this with sandpaper. Should trim this off just a little bit. Don't worry if it's not perfect. It's best to have a little bit of excess, and you can go back over with sandpaper and just manually work it in. In fact, that's what I plan on doing here. So I get all the cutting done, come back around here with sandpaper to try and even this out. Smooth it down so that it's comfortable. Alright, so now on the top, I'm going to go in just about here. So I'm going to come on here and round off this corner. Try and go straight across if I can. Doesn't matter as much because this is going to be, for the most part, covered up by some strapping. I'll show you. There is this ribbed strapping here that will go on here, so that's really going to cover most of what you see there. Alright, onto the neck. Curved lexans, rounded corners. If it's painfully slow, I'm sorry, but that's just the way it is. Take it slow, you don't rush it. Occasionally come back at it from the other way. with your lexans. Get rid of some of the excess. Save this, by the way. Don't throw away your excess. You can use this to make ABS paste. So, like some scraps. In fact, while I'm on that subject, take your scraps down to little pieces like this size. Little tiny scraps. Put it in a glass jar, like one that you would use for like canning jam in or whatever. And then you pour in pure acetone. And then let that melt the ABS plastic. Seal it up. Seal up the jar. Let it melt for a few hours. Come back with a popsicle stick and stir it up. And you ideally want the consistency of Elmer's glue or your typical school glue. You want it fluid enough you can easily spread it around. But you don't want it too fluid and you don't want it too thick. If it's too fluid, it'll drip, it'll run everywhere. If it's too thick, it will dry up in a hurry because ABS paste dries up awfully fast. The acetone will evaporate out of solution faster than you think. And you'll be left with really rigid looking ABS paste on your armor. Alright, I think I'll come back at that with the sander. Alright, that's looking alright. Come back and do the same here. Again, personally I don't think need this return edge, but I'm going to keep it just because it's going to be covered up with the strapping anyway. And then come around to do the other side. You want to try and match up as best as you can. Look at both sides. So looking at this, see how there's all this, it's probably good 4 to 5 millimeter here, but this side doesn't have nearly as generous of an offering, so I might come back here and trim this back down to match this side. All of this is just excess from the vacuum pulling. So now I'm going to flip the lexans, the curve going away. And just start working my way around a little bit at a time, not in a rush. Take your time. Remembering to stop and carefully cut off the excess. So that will reduce the tension around your cuts. If you feel yourself starting to deviate a little bit too far off the path, stop. Just stop. piece of advice. If you start screwing up too much, just walk away. Just set it down, walk away, and give yourself some space. Because this sort of thing just requires time and patience. You can't be in a rush. Don't hurry the job. Alright, now see this? You don't want this. So we're going to trim that off. You want to make sure that there's no cracks going into the armor. You want to make sure that all of your cuts are relatively fluid. You can always go back and sand this down. And obviously we're going to have to make this side match up with this. So this side's going to probably get trimmed down a little bit and probably come flash out here. That's the thing. The one frustrating thing about working with plastic that's been vacuum formed like this is it's really hard to interpret where the excess begins and ends. Like, where is the actual definition? Here it's a little bit more clear, but here the line is pretty fuzzy. Curved lexans again, going away from the cut. When the tension gets high, come back at it, trim off the excess. It makes it easy to resume cutting. I'm going to come back at it the other way here. Alright. All that's left now is the bottom here. I might put it on just to see how it fits. Right away you can feel where stuff has to be trimmed back. So like, I'm gonna probably come around here, and same with here. I kind of like this depth, keeping 5, but eventually you need to kind of taper down to here because it starts to dig into your sides. So trimming away. And this is an awful lot of ABS to trim in one sitting. When I did my Stormtrooper, my New Hope kit, I typically did 1 to 2 pieces a night, and I would call it. Because this is a lot of stress on your hand. And maybe if you've got younger wrists, you can tolerate the pain and the labor, but at some point it gets to be pretty taxing, and the best thing to do is take a break. Don't be in a rush. That's what I tell all newbies that are starting out and looking for advice on building their first Stormtrooper armor or whatever they're working on. Take breaks. Don't be in a rush. In fact, do your best to try and enjoy the journey of it, because you will reach a point when you're done and you're like, all right, I'm ready to do the next project. When I finished my Stormtrooper, I was like, all right, I'm ready for the next thing. I want to do this again. Because the process was a lot of fun. All right, that looks pretty good. And the question is, how does it fit? That fits great. I think so. It fits comfortable. It's good. All right. So that is it. We'll come back at this probably tomorrow with sandpaper. Just to smoothen all the edges, but this feels really good. That's the other thing, is that these return edges, you don't need them. It's all cosmetic. But judge based on how it feels. How does that return edge feel? Is it digging into your body? Can you tolerate it? If you can't tolerate it, maybe come back a little bit finer. In fact, I think while I'm thinking about this, I'm going to trim this back just a little bit more to try and match the other side. So let's see, the return edge starts to go about here. So come in like that. So if I look relatively, even I might trim this back a little. Just a pinch. And honestly, don't go nuts. Like, no one's going to sit here and scrutinize the blend. You just do what feels right for you and what looks right to you. If something looks wrong, fix it. Trust your instincts. You might smooth this out a little bit more with sandpaper. I'm not going to go at it with a lexan. I'm happy with this. More than happy with that. That feels good. All right. Remember to save your scraps. All right. First piece of armor is trimmed. Tomorrow, if I have time, I'm going to start on the back. The back's going to be a similar process. We'll probably keep a lot of this. Probably use this side as a reference to this side, since this is a little bit more defined. But yeah, tomorrow we'll trim that up. All right. Well, I hope part one was at least insightful for you and kind of help you get off onto the right foot for starting out trimming your armor. And if you have questions, throw them in the comments below, and I'll do my best to answer any questions you've got. All right. Thank you very much for watching.